Welcome to WholeCEO with Lisa G. I'm the best-selling author of The Boss Weight Loss. I'm bringing you the top tips to be unstoppable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to actually pull up a chair with today's top experts in mindset, weight loss, business, and more. Learn our top tips so that you can have more energy, be fit and resilient, feel unstoppable, unshakable, and unbreakable. He grows leaders that grow leaders, transforms cultures, and connects people around the world. His proven methods often save others years due to his extensive experience and direct access to a global team of professional experts for nearly 30 years across 30 countries in international banking and wealth management at Citi, Barclays, Australian and New Zealand banking group. He has run large, high-growth business while serving as executive director on subsidiary boards. As a country and regional CEO, he has successfully transformed cultures, strengthened and restructured leadership teams, improved diversity, and revamped faltering businesses to sustain profitably in both benign and crisis market conditions, with extensive experience meeting corporate government requirements, including build out of internal risk management and detection systems. He has an established track record of building highly engaged, productive teams that deliver world-class client experiences with efficient cost bases. Designer and founder and CEO of the Packard Network, Bret Packard, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for that kind introduction, Lisa. It's great to be here on your program. I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you.
Me too. I'm so impressed with your background. It was like hard to get it all in there because you're so accomplished. And I want to talk about handling adversity because let's be honest, the last couple of years have been nothing but.
It really is, right? I mean, and as you well know, because I've gotten to know you recently quite well, as you well know, Lisa, adversity hits when we least expect it, right?
Right.
And just like the pandemic, I mean, when the pandemic happened, that's the most current set of conditions beyond our immediate control. And it's like, wow, this really happened. What's going on here?
And then subsequent things after the pandemic, we had
one
riots,
after another.
We have this war thing going on now, and
exactly.
Women's rights being taken away, and it goes on and on and on about,
and it will continue. The one
economy. How can we better handle adversity since it's not going anywhere?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I learned how to handle it as an individual when back in the mid 1980s, I had a kind of a personal incident. Fortunately, I was quite young then, and I had gone off to a university for the first time, living outside of the house where I grew up with my parents. And to make a long story short, Lisa, I lasted 10 days and I dropped out.
Oh.
And it was just, it was not a good experience. And the reason why I'm telling this story, I think it's important for people to understand. I got up there to the university and the food wasn't good. The professors that I had, they didn't comb their hair the right way. The color of the walls in my dorm room were the wrong color. Everything was wrong except for me. I was, of course, the problem wasn't me.
Of
right?
course not.
Couldn't have, of course not, right? And so it was a classic example of it just, when you get into a situation and things just don't feel right, or maybe you meet somebody and the chemistry isn't right. And it's like, okay, this isn't going to end well. Well, it ended for me at a very immature me after 10 days. And so I went home back then, again, this in the mid 1980s, and had a lot of time to think because I had a dream of becoming an engineer. And that's
Right.
really, I was in pre-engineering. I had done 2 years of junior college commuting from home, but when it came time to get into and really get into it, I just couldn't handle it, and it just didn't feel right. And I had a sour peel in my stomach from
Right.
being in a new environment. So, to make a long story short, I got my act together. I started reading some books. And again, I'm a young kid, right? And anyway, got my head together and said, you know what? I'm going to go into business. I'm not going to do the engineering because I really don't want to work with mathematics my entire life. I want to
Mhm.
work with people. That was kind of the way back then, 1980, I don't know, 1984 or 85, something like that. So I go enroll in a smaller university and sailed through straight A's, 4.0 GPA, because I was inspired. The dorm, I learned not to blame other people for the
Right.
mishap. So what I learned through a book that I read at the time, and I forgot the name of the book, but basically I learned something called an adversity quotient. So I'm going to get back to your question now, called AQ. Everybody talks about IQ, EQ. You hear that
Right.
all the time, especially on LinkedIn.
Right.
EQ, EQ
EQ.
this. If you want to know about EQ, talk to Lisa. Brett's not the guy because I have a lot of empathy, and I think I have a pretty good EQ because I built the experience. But I'm a specialist in AQ and how to handle adversity. And there are three things that I'm going to tell you right now on your program and your network and your listeners that anybody can do. Anybody can do to drive up their AQ, their adversity quotient. Number one, don't do what Bret did back in the university. Don't blame other people for whatever's happening. So
Right.
if the pandemic happens, women's rights happens, whatever happens in the environment, don't blame other people. Number two, don't blame yourself. It's awfully a lot of people, as you know, they blame themselves for everything happening in the world. They blame themselves for the weather, right? They blame themselves for things that maybe they caused the problem, but this blaming game should go away. Okay, because
Agreed.
those are the keys, right? And number three, and the final one, equally important, is to understand that whatever we're facing at this moment in time, we can deal with it, Lisa. We can find a way to either wrestle with it, fight it, argue, agree to disagree, whatever we want to do. But you know what? It's not going to last forever. And
Yes.
these are the three things that I read in a book. So let me fast forward now. So I was able to get through university, right? And then I started my career in 1987, worked 5 years in Las Vegas for a bank, and then 7 years in San Francisco and throughout the state of California. Your great state. I love the Golden State.
Yes.
And and there was something called the Asian financial crisis, 1997. It happened in Thailand.
Right.
The currency that they had, the Thai baht, basically blew up. And so in 1998, there was a reorganization. I was working in San Francisco, a reorganization, and my job was impacted.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I got a call and said, Brett, we need you in Asia because
Wow.
of this crisis. We would like for you to help teach the people in Asia how we do sales in the US. So I went over on the back of the Asian financial crisis
Hmm.
with the attitude of an AQ because it was like going into a storm. Asia does not get very many crises hitting it. It's a very resilient
Really?
economy. That's right. Very resilient. So when a crisis hits Asia, they tend to get over it much quicker than, for example, in the United States, right? And it's
Interesting.
just
Yeah.
kind of the nature of that as well. They had something called SARS,
I
SARS, which you
remember.
might
Yeah.
remember, and they dealt with it effectively, very resilient. And I was living in Japan at the time, so we didn't have to deal with SARS there, fortunately. But I have a lot of people, and I spent a lot of time in Taiwan, and Taiwan was hit very heavily with SARS. So very resilient economy. So I go over there in 1998 with the AQ mindset of let's not play the blame game. Let's focus on what we can control, et cetera. and was incredibly successful. And that marked the start of an international career. Then I was in Japan, 2001, 9/11 happened.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I was running a huge business
Yeah.
and basically responsible for a lot of people. And, when 9/11 happened, I was in Japan. It was 10 o'clock at night when the first plane hit the World Trade Center. People could not access their money because markets were frozen, you might
Right.
remember, and that type of
I
thing. So,
remember. Yeah, I'll
yeah,
never forget that day. It was like 6 in the morning or earlier here in
yeah,
LA.
on the West Coast. Yeah. And so basically, this a similar mindset of, okay, let's not blame people. Let's keep a cool head.
Right.
It's not our fault. This is not somebody else's fault. Let's stay focused and let's deal with it. So we got through that as well. And again, we're talking about hundreds, thousands of people. Then fast forward to 2007 or 8, I was in London and the global financial crisis happened. And we all remember that one as well, or that people call it the credit bubble, whatever you want to call it. And similar thing happened. So we put our arms around the customers. We took care of the customers. There was no blame game going on in the culture that we had built as well. Again, the AQ, the 3 principles that I'm talking about, they guided me, and I was then able to guide thousands of people throughout this crisis. Right. And then, you can just name one crisis after another. Those are the 3 that I had during my corporate career,
right?
Where, and you asked the question on adversity. So let me just repeat again. So for everybody watching this, I'd like for you to focus on your AQ, and you don't have to read a bunch of books. All you have to do is 3 things. One is, don't blame whatever conditions happening around you. Don't blame yourself. Don't blame anybody else, because the blaming's not going to get you out of the crisis. And number 3, understand that you can deal with this. This thing is limited in scope and duration. Stay focused on what you do, and you'll get through it fine. That's my long-winded answer, backed by a proven track record of dealing with adversity with thousands of people, leading thousands of people, or an individual little kid in school that couldn't take moving out of home. That's my answer to your question, Lisa.
Well, it's such a wonderful answer too, because there's never been a time when our mental health and physical health is at such a crisis right now. And I think a lot of it is because of the adversity we've never expected to handle. And there's never been a time where we need somebody who's an AQ expert like yourself. And I want to jump into another topic too, because I read that in your bio about growing leaders that grow leaders. So do you want to answer that one next?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah. It's a great topic, and one that a lot of organizations and companies, they have the HR department does something called succession planning, but it doesn't work really well.
It doesn't. Okay.
In a lot of places, right? And the reason it doesn't work well is that if you look at, let's say that a key person resigns, or key people resign. Right now, one of the things that's right now, the Great Resignation.
Exactly.
Okay. So if you want to scale it up and you want some data to back up what I'm talking about as being an issue, just read the paper and read about the Great Resignation. There are some problems here. Indeed. So basically, growing leaders that grow leaders, Lisa, is looking at. I spent a lot of time also living in Africa, specifically Southern Africa, and let me talk for a minute about a village. So let's say that you have, the way I view a leader is that a leader is responsible and accountable for making sure that the village not just survives, but they thrive. Okay. Right. And so that means that it's not just the people in the village and the workers, but it's also their families and their children. They have to eat, right?
Right.
So a leader that grows leaders, and what I focus on is helping teach people how to fish, not fishing for them. So there's a lot of managers out there, and you need the management skills. So a lot of managers out there that will go catch fish for their people, put the food on the table, and then guess what? Tomorrow they'll go do the same thing. And a year from now, they'll do the same thing as well. So what I want to teach people to do
Yes.
is supply them with the fishing pole, the fishing line, the bait, and actually go with them side by side and catch fish with them until they learn the process, right? So that they can then catch fish. And then I can then go on and work with other people to teach them how to grow vegetables, for example, or do something else as a leader so that I can plan for a flood so that we can make sure that we're not going to get wiped away when the rains come, as an example. And a lot of organizations, I'll get out of the village analogy now, but a lot of organizations now, they do what they can to generate short-term profits, but they're not very good at building leaders for the future. So for example, very shortly, Lisa, as you know, Generation Z and the millennials, Generation Y, are going to comprise of the entire workforce, right? So how are people going to lead these people, which are very different? Generation Z is a lot like Generation X in some regards, and very unlike millennials. You've got millennials that teamwork is number one. Generation Z is more of an individualistic, competitive type of approach. So leaders, and those are facts. So leaders need to understand these dynamics and understand, okay, how can I best connect the dots and, make sure that people are working together as a team, but yet I can fully create an environment and a culture where people will perform at their best. And so that's my answer to your question about leaders that grow leaders, is that how do you prepare leadership for the future and not just kind of get by managing day to day? Does that answer the question?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a more modern, inclusive type of leadership where you're not micromanaging people, but rather growing people, because with the Great Resignation, such a wonderful example of how we can't just have this one dictator in a company and a bunch of underlings, because those people aren't happy with that anymore. I have one quick question for you. In our, you mentioned all these other places that you've lived, and it's so exciting all around the world. How can we transform cultures?
Yeah, that's a big one. It can be done. I've been able to do it before. I did it in Europe for the first time when I was in the UK, and then did it again in Zambia, and then did portions of it in countries like Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, Tanzania, and these. So transforming a culture, first of all, you have to step back and take a look at, well, what is it? Right. What is a culture? And so I would liken it to a smartphone. Okay. So we got to get my we all got a smartphone here. And the feeling when you take this phone out of the box, when you first get it, it's a great feeling. You're excited.
Oh yeah.
What's the first thing you do, Lisa? Turn it on. Right. And
exciting.
you want to use it. Well, if you turn this phone on without activating it or putting a SIM card inside of it, okay, I don't care what you do, it's not going to make a phone call. So you've got to, so the software inside of it, the chip, the SIM card, whatever you want to call it, you've got to have that with the hardware.
Right.
And that's your ecosystem. That's the culture. So you got to have both so that they work together. And we have a lot of organizations right now with the Great Resignation and all this other stuff that does not have a good culture, where the people, so the software is not right. So you've got the hardware, you've got the people, you've got the business, the profit line, you've got a strategy, you've got a plan, you've got all this stuff. And then people say something's not working right because good people are quitting and they're choosing to go. So what is wrong with this programming, the software inside of this beautiful phone? So how do you transform a culture? Well, one thing is to really understand, number one, how do people feel, Lisa?
Yeah,
do
that's
people,
so important.
Yeah. So but you can't, it's impossible to understand how people feel without knowing and asking them what
Hmm.
they need, what
Right.
they're going through. So I'll give you an example. Mothers with daycare responsibility. A lot of that changed during the pandemic. So employers that don't understand the economics of what a mother might be, whether they're single or married, what they might be going through
Right.
in terms of being able to cover the cost of daycare, for example. So
Great
maybe
example. Yeah.
yeah, and the stuff that worked in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, that's very different in the pandemic economy. Things have changed. People feel differently. It's
Yeah.
not just mothers though. So I don't want to downplay the younger millennials that have also chosen not to engage in the workforce because they're not treated fairly, or they're not treated in a manner that will satisfy their needs. And so
Right.
instead of stating all the problems, I'll just throw out the solution again. And that solution would be something called ALA. And that is ask, listen, act. And so what I do, one of the things that I encourage people to do when we're transforming a culture is that you start by involving the people that are doing the work. Okay. So step one, involve the people that are dealing with your customers
Right.
or handling the transactions where you make money, where the profit is generated. So number one is ask them how they're doing. Ask them what they're going through. Ask them what their pain points are. That's the A. Ask
Empathy.
questions.
Yes.
The empathy. This is where the EQ will come into play as
Right.
well. You've got to have it. It's part of this software inside the smartphone, right? That we talked about.
Right.
So number
Ask.
two,
Yeah.
listen.
Listen.
Very important. Now, a lot of people ask questions, and guess what? They don't really listen.
Right.
They just kind of ask for the sake of going through the
I've done that.
activity. Yeah.
Like,
So have
how
I.
are you?
So have I in
Yeah.
my younger years, before I understood a lot of this stuff that we're talking about. I did the same thing, guilty as charged, right?
Right.
So ask, carefully listen, take notes, really listen. And then number three is act, or to take action. So the way that ALA best works is to do it in that order.
Mhm.
Don't take action and then start asking and when you're wondering why it doesn't work. So ask, listen, and act.
Right.
And then I go back and I say, okay, I'm going to do this for you, the people, right, in the culture. I'm going to make
What they
this better
want.
for you.
Right.
But I want you to tell me 3 things that you're going to do
Ah,
if I do this.
wonderful.
Okay. And let's make a deal. Okay.
Deal.
Let's make a deal here. And I'm going to do these things for you, but I want to know what you're going to do for me. You tell me what 3 things you're going to do, Lisa, and it can be any 3 things. And we need to agree on it, just like we're going to agree on what I'm going to do for you. And then let's make a deal here and let's work together and cultivate this new culture that we want to improve. I think firms, to sum up the answer to your question, if they do these things in today's economy, things like the Great Resignation, they'll actually benefit from it because they'll start to attract talent instead of the talent going out the back door.
Well, you are such a wealth of knowledge on modern leadership to solve today's problems. I know we met on LinkedIn, my favorite social media. Where can people find you, Bret Packard?
Yeah, right there. LinkedIn's the best place. I mean, I'm on the other channels as well. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, less prominent there. So the main part is find me on LinkedIn, and it's not that hard to find me. So I'll just put it that way.
Well, thanks, Bret Packard, for being a great guest on WholeCEO with Lisa G. Thanks for coming to WholeCEO with Lisa G. After over 20 years helping people lose weight and get fit, I'm so excited to announce that I found the missing link with my coaching. Message me if you want to learn how to look better, feel better, and go faster with a master. Lisa G at lisagfit.com.